Welcome in to episode 26 of the Barnes Alabama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we've got some things to discuss. It's South Florida game week, so I've got that preview coming up. I want to first start with some news from the Capstone, and then we'll hop right into the preview. So, a few things have happened since I stopped recording on Sunday doing the breakdown, and there were some things that also happened during that game that I said I was going to bring up on this episode, so now is that time. So, a few things I want to talk about. First off, you may have noticed that Ryan Williams was actually interviewed after the game. I didn't talk about it in the original breakdown of the game, but I thought it was definitely worth mentioning. The reason I even mention it is this, again, goes back to all the stuff we've talked about kind of all summer, the difference in DeBoer and Saban kind of doing it their own way. DeBoer is allowing Ryan Williams to speak to the media. You may be like, why is that super important? Well, if you knew anything about Saban's media policy, no freshmen, no assistant coaches speaking to the media. And in DeBoer's case, he has a freshman speaking to the media, has no problem with it. Another thing that they do differently is on their radio show, Saban used to bring in a media member, and DeBoer plans to bring on a player. He's going to highlight kind of each week of his show. So that is, obviously something small, but differences in the guys. The reason I mentioned also the Ryan Williams thing, he had, what's going to go down is probably one of the best quotes that they asked about his connection with Jalen Milroe, and he said, well, 4 plus 2 does equal 6. So obviously that's something you're going to see on T-shirts, and I'm sure kind of thrown out there, and I thought it was really funny. Another thing that's come out about Ryan Williams this week, actually, is Ryan Williams and Jalen Mbakwe released their podcast and announced that they're going to be coming out with one. The university and the Alabama football is helping produce it. It's called the New Wave Podcast. Check it out. I'm sure it's going to be all over YouTube, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcast. Subscribe to that one, just like you subscribe to me. I really, I'm sure the guys would appreciate it. They say they're going to be talking about stories, kind of life on campus. Kind of more behind the scenes stuff. Not all football related, but I'm sure some of it will be. Another thing I wanted to mention, and I am curious about the thoughts on this one. I've heard mixed reviews, most of them positive, but obviously a few negative. And it's the C captain patches on the jerseys, right? So in the past, Saban always announced his captains post-season, right? After the season was over, they would announce their full-time captains, and those captains would end up getting their hands and feet cemented at Denny Chimes. But in this case, they announced the captains before the season, and because they had announced the captains before the season, the 4 guys that are our captains have the captain's patches on the jerseys. Something a little different. You don't often see too many changes with the Alabama jerseys. So just curious kind of what everyone's thoughts are. I personally really like it. I think it looks good, but just curious on everyone's thoughts. Like I said, it definitely is, a little bit of a changing of the jerseys. Obviously nothing too extreme, but definitely something that we have not seen before, especially with how they're chosen. I chose my players of the week, but Alabama has come out with their players of the week, as has the SEC. So I actually want to run through those really quick. The SEC players of the week had Keon Sabb as defensive player of the week and Ryan Williams as a co-SEC freshman of the week. But those don't surprise me at all. The ones that Alabama chose don't surprise me at all either. But they did something unique that I've never seen before, and I thought that it was really cool and just wanted to give it a shout out. And I'll pop it up here on the screen, the graphic they have. But Alabama it looks like they're going to do their players of the week in a couple of different categories. So they have offensive skill, offensive power, offensive scout, special teams, defensive skill, defensive power, defensive scout, and then special teams scout. So the thing with that is obviously you've got a skill player and a power player. So more like a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and then obviously a lineman or tight end, and then defensive line versus like corners and linebackers kind of thing. But the other thing that you don't often see, and really the place where it surprised me, is they're recognizing the scout guys. And I think that's something that's really cool. It's not something you see super often, the scout team getting recognized. Typically, you only hear about somebody in scout team when it's like a big game and it's like, oh, we're using this guy on the scout team to mimic this specifically really good player or something like that. So it's just really cool for me to kind of and to see the team, recognizing some of the scout guys. So the official players of the week this week, as you'll see here on the screen, were Jalen Milroe, Tyler Booker, Graham Roten, James Burnup, Keon Sabb, John Campbell, Colby Peavy, and Jay Loper. So, huge shout out to Roten, Peavy, and Loper for getting that recognition on the scout team. Like I said, not something you see, that I've personally, I don't think I've ever seen it before, but it's just something that is really cool, and glad to see those guys get the recognition they deserve, because obviously they're practicing just like everyone else. They may not get the same game reps, but their practice and their ability on the scout team is something that's super crucial, especially for mimicking the team that you're going to be playing and, getting the team ready for the games that are going to be upcoming. So something really, really cool to see. And then the last thing that we'll cover, and I mentioned that I would at least mention the basketball recruits. So the basketball recruits that were on campus for this past week's game were top 30 recruit Davion Hanna, top 45 Jaden Holmes, and top 80 Amari Allen. Nate Oates was there with them. These are names you're going to hear from some sources from inside the program. Mac, if you're on 3, one of the big insiders, mentioned that Alabama's in a good place with all of these guys. You'll hear a lot about all of these different recruits that Alabama's going to have varying levels of interest in, and football season is a huge time for basketball recruiting as well as football recruiting, but a lot of the basketball recruits come to these football games. It's a good way to get, people that are interested in potentially coming to campus to kind of witness the atmosphere and the environment, and it's something that Nate Oates takes full advantage of. So in the coming weeks, there will be multiple players at all these games. I know we've talked about some of the big players that are going to be at that Georgia game. There's going to be players at this USF game. Just wanted to mention them as we get potentially further down the line where we'll potentially start seeing commitments, or if there's anything interesting that comes up on the recruiting front, I'll be sure to mention it. I just wanted to mention who was at the game. I didn't cover it before the game just because I didn't cover it in the recap because I wanted to cover the game specifically. And then the last thing, I forgot to mention, the last thing I want to cover is just like last week where Grant Nelson was going to J&J and was the official J&J partner for the week. This week's partner that's going to be signing jerseys and autographs for everyone is Chris Youngblood. So if you are interested in meeting Chris Youngblood will be at J&J Apparel in downtown Tuscaloosa, 5:30 on Thursday. J&J plans to do this for most of the home games, especially the big ones. The only one that I've heard that they might be missing is the Auburn game, due to the fact that it is that Thursday will be Thanksgiving. But most of the other home games, from what I'm hearing, they will be doing autograph signings. So if you are interested, I really recommend checking it out. Like I said, this week will be Chris Youngblood, so I'm sure checking it out and supporting J&J as well as Chris Youngblood, everyone would appreciate. They have a 20% off sale on everything basketball during the event. So we're going to hop into the South Florida preview. But that's all that I had to cover for kind of news on the Capstone. That's how I think I'm going to do these preview episodes, is kind of recap everything that's happened, whether it be basketball, football, or otherwise, and then we'll hop right into the preview to break down that week's opponent. So let's get into the preview. This week is South Florida, and South Florida on the surface may look like just some other team that Alabama scheduled and is going to be, maybe a cakewalk. But if you watched the game last year, South Florida gave us all we could handle. Now, circumstances have clearly changed, right? Alabama started Tyler Buckner in that game. Then Ty Simpson came in. It was a raining game. It honestly kind of felt like the offensive line wasn't even fully behind the two quarterbacks because they were more behind Jalen Milroe, and that was the game that Jalen Milroe was benched. Then Milroe, comes in and kind of has his magic And so, obviously, much different circumstance. Alabama did end up winning that game, but 17-3 and 3-3 at half was not what any Alabama fan expected going into that game. So this season, we have USF coming into Bryant-Denny Stadium, and I'm sure all the players that were on the team last year are wanting to get the bad taste out of their mouth of the close game that happened last season, right? Obviously, mostly new coaching staff, different starting quarterback, definitely some different stars on our team, some returning guys, but definitely some new stars for the team. And Alabama will be looking to kind of build off of what they did this past week against Western Kentucky and, build on that before they have their first Power 5 opponent next week in Wisconsin when they're going to be going to Camp Randall. So this is a big game, trying to obviously play one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and we'll talk about him here in just a second. But also just kind of have a get-right game before you have your next your first Power 5 opponent. And like I said, exercise from some demons from last season when it was a much closer game than the experts would have anticipated, than I'm guessing Alabama players and fans anticipated. Just trying to kind of right the ship, so to speak. So, when you're talking about USF, it starts at the top with the head coach, Alex Golesh. If you are familiar with the name, he was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee in 2022 when Tennessee knocked off Alabama. And he then got the job at USF. He was the same coach from last season. And in the first season under Alex Golesh, Byron Brown, that is their starting quarterback, set multiple USF records. He said he was their first ever I've got them written down here. He was the first ever 3,000-yard passer in program history. He has now the season record in passing yards, passing touchdowns, passing completion percentage, completion. He has the total completion record. They have this total plays record, and he has the USF rushing attempts in a season record. He ran the ball 203 times, completed 276 passes at just under 65% last season, throwing for about 3,200 yards, or just under 3,300 yards. Byron Brown is a very, very good quarterback. He's on the Davey O'Brien watch list. I think he's on the Maxwell watch list for this season. He is somebody that absolutely can make you pay through the air and on the ground, and will be a better test at quarterback than Finley was, right? TJ Finley may have had the experience of having played in the SEC, but there was a reason he had dropped down to Western Kentucky. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Byron Brown is somebody that probably, or not even probably, that could transfer to a higher major program. He stayed at USF. He's been very successful there. But he is the type of talent that absolutely has the pedigree and the ability to have transferred up. He obviously stayed with his boys and is going to be successful this season. I expect nothing less this entire season. But that's the kind of quarterback that USF has. And with a coordinator and a coach like Alex Golesh that has the offensive talent in coaching and like the type of formations that he runs and the type of skill that he allows his players to play with, he is going to put Brown in the best position to be successful, right? Similar to when we played Tennessee, you're going to see a lot of wide sets. You're going to see a lot of passing. You're going to see a lightning fast offense. So the defense is going to have to be sure they can get the signals in quickly. Obviously, with the headsets this season, that's going to make it a little bit easier. But making sure that they're ready to run with tempo is something that we definitely are going to have to pay attention to. With Western Kentucky, they sped up slightly, but it was never like a full speed, just go, go, go. Golesh is more of a go, 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 right? That was the type of offense that he ran at Tennessee. That's also the type of offense that they like to run at South Florida, right? Last season, Alabama, I have the stats here. Byron Brown completed his lowest number of passes against Alabama. He only completed 14 passes against Alabama and threw an interception for just 87 yards, rushing 23 times. But if you remember, that game was raining quite a lot. And on our side as well, there was really nothing happening through the air, right? Tyler Buckner nor Ty Simpson really could get anything going through the air. So it's really not that surprising that Brown was not successful in that game through the air versus later on in the season, he would follow it up with 22, 26, 24, 27, 31 completions, right? So Brown definitely has that ability to throw the ball around, to complete a lot of passes, and to stress the defense, right? He had 92 rushing yards against us the first time around, which looks like maybe his fourth high of the season. Had a 31-yard rush as well. Containing him in the quarterback run game and being sure to contain him in the passing and scramble drill will be a key to this game. He's shorter than TJ Finley, so it's not the same style of runner that you had with Finley. It's a little bit more of Jalen Milroe because you've got a 6'3", 230-pound guy versus a 6'6", like 250-pound guy. So it definitely is a different style quarterback with going to be different escapes types like we talked about that Kane Womack mentioned previously. So that's definitely something that you're going to see kind of looked at a lot in this game because making sure Brown stays in the pocket is going to be a key. But even when he stays in the pocket, he has the ability to beat you with his arm, right? So this is going to be a much better test for our defense, right? The other thing when you look at, or let's actually go into this. So in the press conference that happened on Monday, Kane Womack was asked about the Western Kentucky game, and he went on to kind of say that in his mind, it was very good, obviously, that they were able to keep the shutout, but it was not up to his standard from the standpoint of takeaways. He really liked the interceptions, of course, but he would have loved to have seen some more sack fumbles because sack fumbles are obviously a way to kind of take the ball away from the quarterback, and that was something that he challenged his guys that if you're going to get to the quarterback, kind of breaking free, going for the ball is something that he's really stressing on those guys, especially when you have like a swarm of defenders where, going for the ball is not going to limit your ability to make the tackle because you have somebody there to help clean it up, right? So it looks like that's something he's really stressing a lot with his guys, going for the ball, especially when you break free on a sack for potential sack fumbles. He also was talking about people being in position and maybe not making the play, and I think in that case he was referring to the Deontay Lawson dropped interception that I mentioned last time. Obviously, I'm sure they're going to work on it. It's not something I want to harp on, but it definitely sounds like Womack is not satisfied. He definitely is happy with what he saw, but he's not satisfied. Also, he mentioned the same long play drive that I talked about, where there was a 21-22 play drive and the inability to get off the field on third downs, partially due to penalties, partially due to certain breakdowns. And again, that's something that I mentioned. So it really sounds like Womack obviously was very happy that they were able to complete the shutout, but also clearly had some things he wanted to work on. I know I mentioned some of them that he mentioned I was not, I didn't say at all. Like, I was more than happy with the two takeaways. It sounded like he kind of was honestly kind of getting a little greedy and wanting more, but of course, right, you want the most out of your team, especially when you know what they're capable of. On offense, Nick Sheridan was asked about if he was upset that Jalen only had 9 attempts passing the ball. And he was like, no, Jalen took what was given to him and completed the passes that we needed him to complete, made the right decisions with the ball, and was kind of happy with what he saw. And it really sounded like, from the standpoint of what Sheridan saw, he was, like I said, he was happy with what he saw. He thought Jalen was making the right decisions with the ball. He thought that overall the offense obviously was explosive, and he was not at all concerned with the play count because it sounded like, some reporters were asking questions on the mindset of, were you upset that you didn't have quite as many reps? And it's like, no, I know what I have as a quarterback, and I was able to see in the game, in the plays that happen, the right decisions being made with the ball. They mentioned Coach DeBoer mentioned the Kendrick Law flip out where Law's able to get the touchdown, and Jalen would have probably been tackled for, an 8 to 10 yard gain. And so it really sounded like a lot of the things that I thought were kind of keys of the previous game, and some of the good, bad, and otherwise were something that the coaching staff mentioned. And so that was really good to hear, that is kind of their outlook looking forward. From the standpoint of what we kind of expect to see coming into this game, it's going to be more of the same, right? I think for me, the places that I'm looking at the most coming into this game on the offensive side is going to be the offensive line. DeBoer did officially come out and say that Proctor just has a shoulder issue and that he probably will be okay. He's going to be practicing this week and seeing if he's able to go this week. Whether he's able to go or not, how the offensive line looks in this game is something that I'm really going to be looking into very closely. I know in the previous game we got absolutely destroyed when we played South Florida. That was kind of the beginning of the end on the offensive line perspective, and one of the games that I'm sure those guys are going to want back. So this is something to kind of prove their abilities in this game. So the offensive line on the offensive side is by far my place that I am interested in the most. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I liked what I saw out of the safeties. For me, it's going to be the defensive line, because the defensive line in this game and containing to the best of their ability Brown's rushing attack is something that I really want to see, right? Their ability to kind of set contains, and it's going to be the linebackers too, but be able to set contains and make sure he has to stay in the pocket. And, if he does scramble, kind of collapse the pocket and be able to, have him get a minimal gain at most, is something that I'm very interested in seeing, because, like I said, Brown is one of the most elusive quarterbacks that Alabama will face this year. Has definitely some of the best ability that Alabama will face this year as a single just quarterback. Whether he's at USF or not, does not matter. This is one of the best quarterbacks they will play this year. And so I'm very curious at seeing how the defensive line is able to contain and kind of stop his ability to rush the ball. I'm still going to be paying attention to the corners with Damani Jackson and Xavier Brown, especially with Brown being being a freshman. I am curious how they look. But in that first game, I really liked how they looked. Finley was able to complete some passes, sure, but obviously coming away with 2 takeaways and not giving up any touchdowns, you love what you have to see there. Again, this is a higher level passer than Finley was, or the backup at Western Kentucky was. So this is something where, again, step up in competition. Let's see what happens with the corners. So for me, it's still both of the line plays for this. I really loved what I saw out of the other facets of the game in that first game. The places that I still kind of have my questions mostly are in the lines. So that is what I'm personally going to be watching mostly for this game. I probably will be in attendance. I'm not 100% sure on that yet. I have not gotten a ticket. I was talking to my girlfriend on if we're going to be going. But worst case scenario, I'll be watching this game on TV and I will be breaking it down. And the episode breaking it down will come out on Sunday, just like it did this past week. So if you do appreciate the content, I would appreciate if you would drop a follow, drop a subscribe. Like I said, it really does help me out. If you have any questions at all or comments, throw them down in the bottom. I do read them all. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.